Chatzorayim Tovim. Shabbat Shalom. We welcome you to another teaching ministry of Harlingen Messianic Synagogue. This afternoon we begin a new class called Tree of Life. We've made handouts for you. Look like this. So, and this is the Tree of Life. Okay, so we'll be explaining this to you as we go along. Those are yours to keep. You can write on them, write down notes. In fact, I'm going to ask you to write some things because the information is incomplete on there. So, but not right now. We'll get to that probably more towards the end. So this is the introductory class, introducing us to a certain Jewish concept called Kabbalah. There's a Jewish concept called Kabbalah. Everyone say Kabbalah? And almost everyone has heard of Kabbalah these days. Okay, it's all over the place. But understand that there's a lot of misinformation about Kabbalah, about what it is, what it's about, what it's supposed to be about. And so we're going to look into that first because we need to set a foundation for us. We need to set boundaries and guidelines for us. Original Kabbalah. The original Kabbalah is not magic. It is not magic. And it's not satanic. It's not about casting spells. It's not about all of that kind of stuff. It's not about the Hansa hand. Throw all of that away. Okay? Throw all of that away. It's not about sorcery. Those are the kinds of things that you hear today. That's not the original Kabbalah. It is, however, it is very powerful. And because it is powerful, it can be misused, it can be abused, and it can be dangerous. So understand that. But that's true with everything. You can misuse love, you can abuse love, and it can be dangerous. You can misuse grace, you can abuse grace, and that can be dangerous. And in fact, Rav Shaul talks about that in the book of Romans. Shall we abuse grace? Shall we continue in sin? Because God forgives sin. Heaven forbid. You know, and so the thing about Kabbalah is that as with all things pertaining to God, the enemy comes in and perverts it, converts it to his own whim in order to bring about our destruction. This is what he did with Chava in the garden. He took the truth of God, he seeded it with a little white lie, but a little leaven leavens the whole loaf, the whole lump of dough. And so all it takes is a little. You can have an entire story, and if you have one mistruth in there, then the story is not true. The story is not true. It only takes one piece of misinformation to make everything wrong. And we can put this on the physical level. Within your body are cells, and in those cells is DNA. The DNA is what makes up your cell. It's the information of every cell in your body. And makes up the physical aspect of who you are. And in fact, they can take the DNA out of any cell of your body and recreate you, clone you. They can take any cell, because the DNA in your body is the same in every cell. But in that DNA chain, if there is a single piece of misinformation that expresses itself, it can make you sick and it can kill you. Just one single piece of misinformation in the chain can ruin who you are, can ruin your life. It only takes one single extra gene in the human body to cause a person to have Down syndrome. One extra gene. One piece of misinformation. And so it does not take much to pervert. It does not take much to bring about controversy. It does not take much to contort and to take something that is good and make it into something not good. You see, within my genetic makeup, there's a piece of misinformation. And because of that piece of misinformation, I grew a tumor and came down with cancer. Wasn't much. In fact, it just started out with a single cell. The only problem is that cell divided and the replicated. Thank you. I'm glad somebody here reads my mind. Replicated the DNA of that cell. And then those two cells divided again. Just one little piece of misinformation being replicated in those particular cells almost cost me my life. Because something that starts small usually does not remain small. I told one of my kids the other day, Richard was having a problem with the Jeep. The shifter kept falling off underneath from the transmission, and so you'd go over a bump, and whatever gear you were in when you went over that bump, that's the gear you were in. And so you'd come to a stop, and you're still in drive, or you were in reverse and it fell down, so then you're stuck in reverse. And so they took our vehicle to San Antonio. It's bigger. They left me the Jeep. And 3 times in one day, I had to get out, strip down. I had a white shirt on this shirt. In fact, I had to strip down to my T-shirt, crawl under the Jeep, stick the thing back up there. And I said, I'm not going to do this anymore. So I found a little fence tie and wrapped it around. And that sucker's not falling off anymore. Forget the $1,000 that the dealer wanted to fix the thing or whatever. All right, so But I told him, I'm telling you that story to tell you this. I told him, you still need to get that fixed. This is just a temporary fix, but you still need to get that fixed, because even though it's a small thing, small things have a bad habit of turning into big things. You see, if I had gotten my colonoscopies when I was supposed to, big, tough, strong, brave man, gonna live forever, they would have found the little polyp and taken care of it then. But because I didn't, it grew. The doctors told me that that was probably in me for about 10 years. They could have gotten it a long time ago. Saying, when we let the little things go and aggravate us, little things have a tendency to become big things. And so it just takes a little bit of a lot to ruin the whole thing, to ruin everything. So, original Kabbalah is not magic. It's not about casting spells. It's not about sorcery. It's not about astrological telling of the future. And by the way, there are two kinds of astrology. Not astronomy. There are two kinds of astrology. There is a good astrology that the Besorot, the Besorah, is actually told, displayed in the stars. And then there's the astrology of you're going to lose $100 today, or you're going to hit the jackpot today, or whatever. So, is Kabbalah good or is it bad? The answer is yes. Is sex good or bad? The answer is, it depends. What is its purpose? How is it being used? What is the context? Within the holy bonds of matrimony, as Hashem intended it, it is a beautiful thing. And it is what, in fact, makes two become one. It's a beautiful thing. Outside of that context, it is a wickedness. Have you noticed in Scripture how God relates adultery with idolatry? Because there is a spiritual context to the sexual relationship of a man and a woman. And in fact, that is the time when a man and a woman are most open to each other and are bonding with each other in emotional and mental ways, as well as in a physical way. This is why Rav Shaul warns us in 1 Corinthians, do you not know that he who is attached to a prostitute, that a person who attaches himself to a prostitute, your attachment is for life. You know that when you have sexual relations, that's when God considers you to be married. That is the act of marriage. When two become one, that is why in most religious contexts, if there has not been the fulfillment, the sexual fulfillment between a man and a woman, that the marriage can be annulled, not a divorce. It's annulled. It did not happen because the context of the man being joined to the wife and the two becoming one is found within the sexual relationship. Saying all of that to say this: If you ask me, is sexuality good or bad? I will tell you that depends. What is the context? And so the same is true with Kabbalah. Is it good or is it bad? That depends. What is the context? But that is true of everything that God gives to us. Everything that God gives to us. So we must consider it in its proper context. So let me answer a question that some of you have asked. Many people ask this question. Is it okay for me to study Kabbalah? The answer is yes and no. There are parameters. There is context. Because in order for you to understand what we're discussing, you must be at a certain level of spirituality within yourself. You must be at a certain level of spirituality. And we need to be guided. A shepherd does not take the sheep out into the field and just, okay, sheep, go eat. That's the whole reason why the shepherd is there, to make sure that the sheep is getting good food, getting good grass, not getting into bad grass, not getting into, the old West. They had to watch out that the cows didn't get into the loco weed, because the cow would go crazy. And so to ensure that we don't cross boundaries and get into areas where we should not be going, I ask that we study Kabbalah together here, and that you go back over what we're studying here. You may focus on that, on the things that we discuss here. You may check up on what I'm saying about the things that we say here. You may, what's the word? Well, you need, you may, to focus, to concentrate, to, what's the term I'm wanting here? No. Meditate. Is meditation good or bad? Yes. It depends on what you're meditating on. David Chamelech said, I lay on my bed at night and meditate on the Word of God. Now, if you're laying on your bed going, Om, Om, no. We're not into Brahmanism. We're not into the Eastern religions, those kinds of things. To meditate means to turn over in your mind certain thoughts, certain things, to let it turn over, to take a scripture and just focus on it, focus on every word, every letter, every significance of that portion. So yeah, you may, and I guarantee you, you will go home and sit there and say, because we're going to hit some things. You are going to have many aha moments. That's where the old Ford commercial, the little light bulb's going to go off on your head, and you're going to suddenly get it, and you're going to hear some fabulous, fantastical things. Some things even today you're going to hear that's going to make you say, what? I don't know about that. I don't understand that. Because Kabbalah is powerful. also understand that there are forces that will want to take this information and use it against you. So we enter carefully, prayerfully. Anything that smacks of fortune telling, sorcery, witchcraft, casting spells, communication with the dead. We are warned by Torah to avoid such things. That is an abomination of the enemy. That is idolatry. And we are warned. In fact, the penalty for doing such was what? You remember? Death. So we're warned to be very, very careful. It's not, you see, people think, that the Ouija board is some innocent game, some innocent toy. There's nothing innocent about it. Not even the purveying of your astrological sign, your astrology in the newspaper or what. There's nothing innocent about those things. These are doorways that the enemy has left there to trap you, to tempt you to open that door and to see what is there. But in doing this, he draws you in. He draws you into the trap. And before you know it, horrible things are taking place in your life. And you don't know how to get out of it. And so, be very, very careful. The word Kabbalah means to receive. And, by the way, this is where we get our English word cabal. What is a cabal? Usually you think of a cabal as being a group of people, a group of men meeting together, a society. And so it comes from the word Kabbalah. But it means to receive. Is it wrong for us to look into the secret things of God, into the mysteries of the things of God? Is it wrong for us to seek out these things? No. And in fact, these secrets are there for this very purpose. Is it wrong for you to take a pick and a shovel and go out to New Mexico or Colorado and look for gold? Is that a wrong thing for you to do? We call that treasure hunting. And that's what Kabbalah is. Kabbalah really is treasure hunting. We're looking for pearls. We're looking for gems. We're looking for diamonds. Not physical ones, spiritual ones. And you're going to find some very beautiful gems. And once you see them, you cannot forget them. I promise you. Once you see some of the beautiful aspects of who God is and who you are and our relationship to Him, you'll never forget it. So God has hidden many treasures for us to seek out, to learn and to understand. And as we do this, it's going to bring us into a greater wonderment of God and His ways. What He has done, what He's doing, what He's going to do, how He reacts, how He acts, how He interacts with us. And in fact, Melech Shlomo tells us in Sefer Mishle, the book of Proverbs, chapter 25 and verse 2, He says, it is the glory of God to hide things, and it is the honor of kings to search them out. Shlomo tells us that God has purposefully hidden things for us to seek out. So there are mysteries in the scripture. There are actually levels of studying the divine. From the very simplistic to the very complex. From the very light to unfathomable depths. In fact, we have these levels of studying Scripture given to us in a series, in a thing called Pardes. Everyone say Pardes. You can write it down. Pardes, P-A-R-D-E-S. Pardes means orchard in Hebrew. The Garden of Eden. Pardes. P-A-R-D-E-S. We take it from the consonants, because Hebrew only has the consonants. So literally it's the Pe, the Resh, the Dalet, and the Shin, or the Sin. Pardes. The Parasha. These are different levels. Parasha, each one gets more in depth. Parasha, the Pe, the P, is the plain, simple meaning of the text within its context that an 8-year-old child would understand. So when you're sitting down reading the Torah to a child, the way the child would understand it is the way God intended it. That is the simple level. So when it says in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, just like that. God said, let there be light, just like that. God said, let the sea give up the land, just like that. Let the trees come forth, just like that. Let the fish come forth, just like that. The story of Noah and the flood. The way an 8-year-old child would understand the story as you're reading it to him out of the Torah. The story of Avraham, the way the child would understand it as you're reading it. The story of Moshe, the way the child would understand it as you're reading it to him. That is the simple level. The thing about the simple level is that is the foundational level and cannot change. You cannot change the simple level. You may use the simple level to extrapolate, but everything must return back to the simple form. The second is the Resh, the Remes. The Remes is the analogical undertones, analogies. How can I use this as an analogy to other things? In other words, how can I stretch this out into other areas? So that it doesn't just say here. And you find this often being done in Judaism, in the Midrashim of the Chazal, of the sages. You will often find them extrapolating. In other words, because it says this here, we take that line of thought over to here, and we can apply it, and it works. It's something that we call the law of first mention. When you first hear of something here, when you first hear of the dove, when you first hear the expression of the Spirit hovering over the water of the face of the deep, and over in the Besorah, you read about the dove descending upon Yeshua, upon the Word, You have the Spirit and the Word over here. Now you have the Spirit and the Word over here. You can extrapolate and take it all the way along. You can follow the thread. That means you can take this doctrine and you can apply it over here, even to make a new doctrine that applies from this doctrine. So you take it from here. If it says this here concerning this, then you can take that out and plug it in over here, and it still works. And in truth, we'll get into this a little bit deeper. That's much like mathematics. What, right? Saying what? One of the rules of mathematics is what you do to one side, you must do to the other. And so so that is the remes. The next level is called drash. The dalet, the d, drash. Drash means to teach. The teachings. What is that? How do I apply this in my everyday life? How does this apply to me? How can I take this and apply it? Once again, you're going into complexity. So if he says, do not cheat here, that also applies to over here. If he says to be just here, that also applies over here. So if he tells me that I am not to you shall not steal, that not only means that I'm not to steal from you, but it also means I'm not to steal from the government. You see what I'm saying? Because people will say, well, it's okay to steal from the government. Yeshua said, no, it's not. And so how can I apply this to my life? So as remes becomes complex, can become complex, so also drash can become complex. How do I take the story of Noach and apply it to my life? How do I take the story of Sinai and apply it to my life? How do I take the story of the golden calf and apply it to my life? How do I take the story of the Akedah and apply it to my life? The application. And then the final level is called Sod. S-O-D, Sod, like Sod, but Sod, long O. Sod. And Sod means mystery. The things that are hidden. And so some of the things of Sod are, as most of you know, that most Hebrew words come from a 3-letter root word. Each letter in the Hebrew alphabet, each letter has its own definition, its own significance. For example, if I were to say to you, what does the letter A mean in English? What does the letter A mean? What is the significance of it? Well, it's like almost a triangle kind of thing with a little, it has a shape, but it doesn't have definition. But in Hebrew, Aleph has definition. It's the strength. Bet has definition. It's a house. So the strength of the house, Ab, is the Father. This is the way Hebrew works. And it works like that every single time. That the Hebrew letter is also the Hebrew number, and the Hebrew number is also the Hebrew letter. So when you're making words, you're also making sums of equations. You're also making numbers. And those numbers have significance. But when you're making numbers, you're also making words. And it works every single time. And so as the rabbis tell us, only the genius of the God of the universe could come up with a plan like this. Who could have thought this out? Who could have made up this kind of a language? Where it's both definition and mathematical at the same time. Did you know that Albert Einstein was a Kabbalist? That his theory of relativity and his great theorems are all based on Kabbalah. And in fact, Dr. Einstein has been quoted as saying, "I know that there is a designer because the universe has a design. And where there is a design, there must be a designer." Now understand, he did not believe in the concept of God the way we would. But he himself admitted there's something about this that is out there that tells me that there is some being, some existence, something that created this. The father of, I believe the father of calculus, the great father of modern mathematics, Sir Isaac Newton, was a Kabbalist. It is not that Sir Isaac Newton discovered gravity. Gravity has always been, and everybody knew that if you dropped an apple, if an apple fell from a tree, it's going to hit you in the head. There's nothing new about that. What Sir Isaac Newton did was he formulated it in a mathematical equation. And what Sir Isaac Newton was able to do was formulate everything into everything can be processed through calculation. But what is amazing about the discoveries of Isaac Newton and of Einstein and all of the people, all of the scientists in between. Who's buzzing? Somebody's got a buzz going on around here. So what is amazing about all of the discoveries of physics, geophysics, quantum physics, chemistry, all of these discoveries were known by the Jewish sages centuries before they were pronounced upon by modern society. In fact, all of the nuclear dynamics, all of the rocketry, all of the things that we have in our age, this very thing here, the concept of all of this was known by Jewish sages hundreds of years ago. And the ability for this to happen. Then why did it not happen? Because they were not scientists, they were rabbis. They were not doing this to come up with such genius things such as this. They were coming up with what they were coming up with what they were teaching, what they were understanding, that they might better communicate with God. And we're going to talk about some of those things. But it is amazing that it was actually the Chazal of Judaism who defined for us in the very beginning the certain laws of math and physics before they were ever formulated in the Western world. And you can go back and you can read the writings of rabbis from 500, 600, 800, 1,000 years ago and compare them to the writings of scientists in the late 1800s and the early 1900s, the 1920s and the 1930s. And you would be fantastically amazed that people 500, 600 years before that had already formulated these things. Einstein knew this. Sir Isaac Newton knew this, and they studied these things. By the way, Sir Isaac Newton was a believer of Yeshua. He was a believer. And he actually formulated when he believed that the end of times would come. It's only 20 years away. According to his calculation, we are within the time frame of Sir Isaac Newton's calculation. Now, he lived in the 1600s, I believe. So 400 years ago, he was telling us Jesus is coming back in this time frame. By calculation, by calculus. So let's begin. That's just the introduction of the introduction. In the beginning, Bereshit. Everyone say Bereshit. Be, say be. Be means in. Reshit means beginning. So Bereshit, 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 Bereshit. So when you say it fast, you know, like you do some things in Spanish or English, right? You smash things together, Bereshit. In the beginning, there was God. Only God. Only God. Everybody say, only God. No one else. Nothing else. Only God. And we call this Ein Sof. Ein, everyone say Ein. E-I-N, Ein Sof. S-O-F. Sof. Ein Sof. Ein Sof is the Kabbalistic concept of infinity. There is no true infinity except God. Only God is truly infinite. Everything else has beginning and has end. Only God is truly infinite. And I hate to break your hearts. I will do so gently. Buzz Lightyear is wrong. There is no beyond infinity. And you cannot multiply infinity times infinity. So that little girl in the commercial is wrong. Infinity simply is. It is not multiplied. It is not divided. It is not added to, nor is it subtracted. For to do any of these things means it is not truly infinite. Therefore, infinity simply is. This is why in Hebrew, there is no verb form of to be. I am, you are, he is. In Spanish, there are two verb forms, to be, the permanent and the temporary. In Hebrew, there is no verb form to be, with the exception of dealing with those things, dealing with the infinite God. So in Hebrew, they don't use the term is or are or was or were. They do not exist in the Hebrew mind, because that speaks of eternality. And the only eternality is God. Only he is eternal. So the only infinite is Ein Sof, God himself. In this unique form, in this infinite form, and by the way, we do not know him in this form. You do not know God in his infinite form. You cannot know him in his infinite form. He is beyond your understanding because you yourself are finite. and the finite cannot understand the infinite. Just as the single dimension cannot see the double, the two dimension, and two dimension cannot see the third dimension, and the third dimension cannot see the fourth dimension, and the fourth dimension cannot see the fifth dimension. They can only see what they are. You can only see what you are. Therefore, this is what it means when it says, no man has seen God. You cannot see him, for he is non-dimensional. Can you understand that? He has no dimension. He's infinite. He simply is. And in this infinite form, he is uniquely singular and simple. In fact, we see God as being complex. Very complex. So complex that we do not understand him. But you must understand that he has only become complex in order for you to understand him. Because in his singular simplicity, he is ununderstandable and unknowable to you. For example, the simplest form of existence to the human is the atomic particle. And the atomic particle is creation in its simplest form. It's the physical aspect in its simplest form. However, we only understand it because it is found in a complex system. And it is that complexity that gives to it definition. And it is only by definition that you know and understand something. In God, in his infinite form, in true infinity, there are no defining terms. That is why we say he simply is. This is the uniqueness of his singular formality, of the simplicity of his existence. He simply is. There are no defining terms of his existence. There are no limits. There are no boundaries. There are no borders. There are no edges. He simply is. There are no attributes. Chen, the chesed, gevurah, grace and mercy, compassion, justice. These things do not exist in his infinite form. He simply is. There is no thing called love. It's a thing called love. There is no thing called love. There is no thing called grace. There is no thing called kindness. There is no thing called beauty. Because there's no need for any of these things. They are unnecessary. If God is all that there is, in his very simplest form, in his singularity, in his infinity, if that's all that exists, then there's no need for these things. Therefore, they don't exist. They only come into existence because they are necessary. You see why to understand God in this form is impossible for us. How do you describe him? And if you can't describe him, you cannot understand him. And this is what makes him God. He is unique and there's none like him. This is why that is such a great statement that we find in Judaism, that he is the only one. He is the only God, and there is none like him. Even those that would be supposed as gods do not come near, do not come close, are not even a micromilligram in comparison to God. That we say that there are no attributes to him in this form must be understood. Because the moment we begin to define something is the moment we begin to place limitations upon it. By the way, if you have any questions, wake up, everybody. Wake up. Those carbs are hitting hard now, man. That pie. Shouldn't have had that second piece. We're in depth here, okay? And if you're going to keep up, you have to pay up, okay? Going deep. We're going to go surprisingly deep just in this introduction. You'll see in just a minute. And that's why I need you to pay attention. The moment you begin to give something definition, the moment you begin to define something, you place upon it limitations, and it's no longer infinite. Therefore, the moment we begin to describe God as being this, as being that, as having this, as having that, it's no longer Ein Sof. This is now the creator God. This is the creator aspect of God. So the moment we define him, he loses that infinite aspect to us. I did not say he loses the infinite aspect. I said to us. For the Ein Sof is always the Ein Sof. He is. And that is the aspect of God you cannot see and you cannot understand. God, in his pre-creative form, is unlimited and thus undefined. So, let me tell you something. I have something. Ready? I have something. Everybody got it? Say, he has something. I have something. Everybody understand? Say it again. He has something. What is it?
Something.
Well, what is it? You see how limitless that is, how boundless that is. It can be anything, right? That is, in effect, infinity. Because you have no concept of what it is I may have. There are no defining terms. Possibilities are very broad. You can say it's endless. But allow me to throw in a defining term. It has a shape. It's round. Ah, round, he said. So now what? I say, I have something. What is it? You can say what? It's round. Therefore, it is not square. It is not triangle. It's not rectangular. It's not octagonal. It is round. So I have just done what? I have brought in from the wide scope to the narrow scope. I have narrowed the prospects. Because you can throw everything out that's triangular, that's square, that's rectangular, that's octagonal, whatever, you can throw it all away. And only keep those things which are round. I've given it some kind of definition. Therefore, I have caused a limitation. I tell you that it is hard. Boom! I have something. What is it? Well, it is round and so now what? Well, that tells you Not only is it not triangular or square or quadrangle or octagonal, but it is also not soft, nor is it medium. It is hard. So I have something round and hard. Now I'm going to tell you I have something. I'm going to give you another defining term. So you see how the scope is coming in. So I'm going to give you another defining term. It is blue. What does that mean? That means it's not red, it's not green, it's not orange, it's not yellow, it's not purple, it's not black, it's not white. It is blue. So I say I have something. And you can now tell me what. You can define for me what I have. What do I have? Well, it's something round, something hard, something. What is it? Now, you still have a vast definition, a vast amount of things that it can be. But you see how it has narrowed and it has become limited in what it can be. This is what we mean when we say, when to give something definition brings about its limitations. Therefore, when we begin to give God definition, we begin to bring about limitations. Therefore, when we give to him attributes, we begin to bring about limitations. Are you ready? How many of you are ready? Everybody go click. Come on, click. Fasten your seatbelts. Hang on. You're in for the ride. Here we go. There's a theorem in quantum mechanics called the paradox of superposition. Anybody ever hear of this? It's also known as Schrodinger's cat. This theorem came up in a conversation with three physicists, one of whom was Albert Einstein, the other was named Schrodinger, in trying to explain quantum mechanics. Quantum mechanics is what makes up the structure of the universe. Basically, they were trying to figure out the structure of the atomic matter of the atom. And so Mr. Schrodinger, Dr. Schrodinger, came up with this. It's called the paradox of paradox of superposition.
Superposition.
Okay, paradox means what? It's not supposed to be that way. It's not supposed to work that way. Right? Everybody understand? A paradox is something that doesn't make sense. It shouldn't be that way. It seems like it would be the opposite. And the paradox of superposition goes like this. There's a cat in a box. You know the cat is in the box. It's there. Question. Is that cat dead or alive? Good.
It depends.
All those answers are correct. That's the paradox. There can be multiple answers. You don't know if it's dead or alive. You may imagine. You may suppose. And your supposition makes it so. As you are supposing that the cat is alive, the cat is alive. Or as you are supposing the cat is dead, then the cat is dead. It is as you will. Until you open the box. When you open the box, the reality springs forth. Or not, depending on whether the cat's dead or alive. Saying, the reason why Schrodinger comes up with this is that things may exist in simultaneous states until they are observed. It is the observation that brings it into being. Let me put it to you another way. If a tree falls in the woods and no one is there, can you hear it fall? Does it make a sound? Does it? How do you know? You're not there to observe it. You're assuming that it makes a sound. But if you're not there to observe it making a sound, can you prove it makes a sound? This is the paradox of superposition. It is what you would assume it to be. What if I assume that it makes no sound, it just simply quietly falls? That is Schrodinger's cat. He's in the box. You cannot see it. Is he dead or is he alive? Yes. He's both at the same time until you open the box and observe. So you want a real-time example of this that they have proved? A real-time example. By the way, Einstein did not like this kind of stuff. It gave him the goosebumps. It really did. It gave him the he did not like this. He called it spooky science. He called it spooky science. He also called it misbehaving. He called it misbehaving at a distance. Let me find where I am. It makes for a very curious thought process when you start following down these trails. And it's very interesting to follow down these trails because you can come up with all kinds of things. All kinds of conclusions are there. For example, what exists and what doesn't exist? And how do you know it exists? It is the old philosopher's statement of, I think, therefore I am, which is true. But let me ask you concerning the world around you, what is real and what is not real? What is real and what do you suppose is real? You see, Isabel, you made an assumption that you can hear the tree because in your experience of life, when you were standing there, you heard the tree fall. Therefore, you observed it. But what about when you're not standing there? Can you still hear the tree fall? Does it still make a sound? We don't know because it's not being observed. It only makes the sound, according to this theorem in quantum mechanics, it only makes a sound if you are observing it. Therefore, when something is not being observed, it in essence ceases to exist. By the way, this is a law of quantum physics. This is a law of physics called the law of conservation. The law of conservation declares that everything in the physical world will conserve energy when it is not necessary. This is why when a car is going uphill, the further up the hill and the higher the incline, what happens to the car? It slows down. Why? Because it is conserving energy. Therefore, it takes more energy to push the car up the hill. It is the only way that something will move by itself is on an inclination, when it's on an incline. Even on flat ground, unless there is some other force to move it, it will not move. So, part of this, a big part of all of this, of quantum mechanics, following the laws of conservation, state that things do not exist unless they're being observed. And this is why the question is, what is real? This is the basis of the whole movie, The Matrix. If you've watched the movie The Matrix, it is all a big simulation. And it only exists so long as it is being observed. But when it is not being observed, it reverts back to its original form, which is mathematics. That's why you see on the Matrix and you see all the ones and zeros flying around. That's what that's all about. Everything is made up of mathematics. This is quantum mechanics. The writers of the Matrix were two Jewish brothers, Kabbalists. Does it surprise you? Now, they're not so good boys today. But they are Jewish Kabbalists. And the whole idea of the Matrix. That's why Trinity, Neo, the new man, the Messiah. That's where all this is coming. This is all coming from Kabbalah. It's not Christianity. This is Judaism. The Trinity. What's the black woman? What her? Yes, the oracle. All of that she's the spirit. This is all Zohar. This is all Kabbalah. People think that it's Christianity. It's not Christianity. It's Judaism. These two brothers are explaining Kabbalistic Judaism to us. This is why when, as Cito was mentioning this morning, when Jewish people tell you, oh, we've never thought that, so, here you go. Ready? You better pull it up a notch. As long as you're watching something, it appears as it should. But when you're no longer observing it, it goes into conservation mode. So, you put a book in the closet. Is it there? Is it there? Or is it? How do you know? But you're not observing it. It's the cat in the box. You don't know if that cat is dead or alive. Is the book flipping through its own pages? Or is it just laying there? It's in conserve mode. And in conserve mode, according to, now this is true, I'm not making this stuff up. You can look it up. According to quantum mechanics, the book does not have to be there because you're not observing it. It only needs to be there when you open the door. When you close the door, everything behind the door, Matrix, everything behind the door disappears. Outside over here, what's there? Beyond that wall. Can you see beyond that wall? What exists beyond that wall? You think, you have an idea, you have an impression of what's there, but you cannot definitively tell me that it is there. Because I can definitively tell you through quantum mechanics, it may not be there. You assume it's there. Huh? You can't see it. So, they tested this out. They took a piece of cardboard and they cut a hole in it. And they shined a light beam through the hole. Light beams are made up of light photons. Photons are particles of light. They travel in a straight line. Okay? Light travels in a straight line, unless it's deflected, reflected, such as that. So, they shot this beam of light, they shot these light photons through the hole in the cardboard. Very simple experiment. Except what they discovered is this. So long as the light was being observed, the photons would behave properly and go through the hole in the cardboard. But when the light photons were no longer being observed, they no longer went through the hole in the cardboard. They simply meandered aimlessly around until they were once again observed, and then they would go through the hole in the cardboard. Now, I'm not making this up. This is why Einstein did not like quantum mechanics, because this is true. And through certain non-observational means, they were able to observe the photons misbehaving, not doing what they're supposed to be doing. You assume, this is the paradox, you assume that it's supposed to be this way. Did you know that they can now take an atom or take a molecule, an atomic molecule, and you assume that it is here, but they have discovered that it can be here and here at the same time. And now you get into all kinds of things like string attachments, that everything is connected. That the farthest star away from where you're sitting is connected to you. It's called the string theory. Everything in the universe is connected. By the way, look at your Sephirot. They're all connected. And even the ones at the furthest distance are still connected to the one at the furthest distance. A table appears to be solid. I say appears to be because it is not. If you are able to take a micron microscope, an electronic microscope, and look at its makeup, you will find that there's actually more space in it than there is physical matter. In fact, if the nucleus of an atom were the size of a pencil head, the closest subatomic particle would be a mile away. If the nucleus of the atom is that size, the closest subatomic particle, i.e. the electrons, a mile away. That's how much space is in between. The atom itself is not solid. It is made up of particles of matter, which themselves, when you break them down, neither are they solid. There's nothing solid about it. You say, well, then why does the table feel solid? It is only because the table is more dense than your hand. Therefore, it feels solid to you. It is packed more densely than your hand, than the molecules in your hand are packed. Therefore, it feels more solid to you. When you have molecules that are less densely packed, like water. Your hand can go through it. It's not hard, it's soft. What makes something hard and what makes something soft? When you freeze water, the reason why water freezes is because the atoms, the molecules have coalesced. They become dense under temperature. The reason why it turns to steam is because they spread out in heat. Hard and soft. Why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this because, first of all, these are just some of the beginnings of the wonders of the creation in which you're living. To help us to understand in Jewish thought process that though this appears to us to be the real world, this is actually the simulation. It is the spiritual world that is the real world. We're living in a simulation. By the way, Elon Musk is a believer that the physical world is a simulation. So was Albert Einstein. So was Isaac Newton. So was Mr. Tesla. These aren't quacks. They're geniuses. This is where the science leads. You hear it all the time today, right? Trust the science. The reason why it's hard for you to believe is because you've been brought up to believe that this is the reality. There are beings in existence all around you right now, all around us, that you cannot see. There's actually a warfare taking place. Good guys, bad guys. There's all kinds of activity taking place of which you are unaware. Because though it's in the realm, it's in a different dimension of the realm. So you can't see it. Why? Because the one-dimensional cannot see two-dimensional. And the two-dimensional cannot see three-dimensionally. And the third dimension cannot see four-dimensionally. You can only see in the dimension you are and below. Can those beings see you? Yes. But you can't see them. They're in another dimension above you. Therefore, they can look down, or as it were, and see you. And God, He's above all the dimensions. And He can see down through every single layer. All of this is to tell you, this is the greatness of God. But you see how I've taken something so simple and now it's become complex. It's just blown open into complexity. Because the more you understand, the more definition given to something, the more complex that something becomes. The unknown quantitative opens for limitlessness. The unknown quantity and quality opens the way for limitlessness. But once there's a defining term, the limitation appears. But once the limitation appears, so does the complexity. And so does the duality. Duality, the definition of something, makes that something limited in its nature and more complex. The Ein Sof, the infinite one, exists without other forces, This is something that we need to understand, and we're going to close here in just a minute. The infinite one has no needs. The Ein Sof, the infinite one, lives independent. You need him. He does not need you. He lived forever without you. His existence is not necessitated upon you, upon your existence, but your existence is necessitated upon his existence. Saying that creation, we have an idea that creation, God created and then boom, stopped. He stopped creating in that sense, that he's creating new things. But the creation act continues. Because if it does not continue, you cease to exist. So long as those numbers are running up and down the wall exists. But once those numbers stop running up and down the wall crumbles. Therefore, the scripture says that the world exists by his spoken word. The Ein Sof continues to generate the power of the existence of this universe, including you and me. And if he ceases to generate that power, that energy, then we cease to exist. Have you ever wondered if God, whether or not God is thinking about you? Did you ever wonder about that? No? Come on. Wake up. Have you ever wondered? I wonder if God's thinking about me. So how did the Chazal answer that question? You exist. If God were not thinking about you, you would not exist. You would cease to exist immediately. As soon as he stops thinking about you, you stop existing. How do I know that God is thinking about me, that God is thinking about you? You exist. Therefore, the song is true. You are always on his mind. Always. So, if we have this infinite form, being, and that's all there is. To put it in a way that we can understand, that's all there's room for. In infinity, there's only room for infinity. There's room for nothing else. So in his form of Ein Sof, there's only room for Ein Sof. There's room for nothing else. Therefore, we do not exist. Therefore, in order for us to exist, he must then limit himself. And this self-limitation is called Tzimtzum. Everyone say Tzimtzum.
Tzimtzum.
Tzimtzum means to limit oneself. As you have heard me teach, Tzimtzum is as the pregnancy of a woman. A woman makes room within herself for the baby to exist. So God has done with his creation. When he takes on his creative action, before he can take on the before he can create, he must make room within the infinite form in order for you to exist. Therefore, he must limit himself. When you hear certain Jewish people say, well, God would never limit himself, would never stoop to becoming a man, all you have to say to them is, Tzimtzum. He already limited himself for the act of creation. It's nothing for him to limit himself even further into the form of a human being. And we'll get deeper into that when the time comes. So if you look at the paper, if you look at the handout that I gave you. Therefore, in order for God to create, he must have defining terms. He makes within himself defining terms, and these defining terms are called sephirot. Everyone say sephirot. That's the plural. Sephirah is the singular. Sephirah is the singular. You notice that these are the sephirot. This is a sephirah. This is sephirah malchut, sephirah yesod, sephirah netzah, sephirah chod, sephirah tiferet, sephirah chokhmah, sephirah da'at, sephirah bina, and sephirah keter. You notice that they are all enclosed in what? Malchut is enclosed in what? The sephirah looks like a what? Come on. It's a shape. Looks like a what? Say it. This is interactive. This is class.
Oval.
Like an egg, okay, like a circle. A sphere. Listen. Sephir, sphere, 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 sphere. That's where the word sphere comes from. Sephirah. It is a sphere. What do you have written within the sephirah? A word. Right? Sefer. So we read today Sefer Shemot. Saying what? Sefer, what is what? Book. Comes from Sephirah. Did you know that the Torah is an attribute of God? It is one of the Sephirot. That's why we call it Sefer. By the way, we have Sefer, we have cipher, to cipher and decipher. What is ciphering? Cipher that out, boy. Figuring, writing, to cipher. In fact, the sifrot, the scribes. Our word cipher comes from sephirah. To write comes from this term. It is an attribute. The act of writing, the actual act of writing is an attribute of God. Why? We're going to close here. Because in order to create, God did what? Every single time God creates in Genesis 1, every single time God creates, how does he create? He spoke it. And God said, in order to speak, there must be words, and in order for there to be words, there must be letters. The Aleph Bet. These are the ciphers. These are the sephirot. You notice in between, the connections between the sephirot, the pathways are what?
Letters.
The letters. That's the DNA. And in fact, the sages tell us that the Hebrew Aleph Bet is the DNA of the universe. It is from this which all things are created. Why is it important to learn Hebrew? That's why. That is the very foundation building block of all of creation. Is the Aleph Bet. Before, the sages tell us, before God created anything, he first created the Aleph Bet. Through the Aleph Bet, he spoke the words. Let there be. And he, watch, in the beginning was the Word. And the Word was with God. The Word was God. So, end of our introduction to the tree of life. Next week, we're going to we're going to explain the tree to you, what all of this means. Not all of, but all of it means. Because that's going to take like 100 years. In fact, you think, listen to me, you don't believe me? Within every sephirot, watch, within every sephirot is every other sephirah. So within Malchut, all of these others are within Malchut. Within Yesod, Malchut and all of the others are in Yesod. So don't think that when we get into the life to come, you're going to be floating on a cloud playing your harp and bored out of your gourd. Every single, if there were moments in the world to come, every single moment is going to be wow, wow, wow. You thought the explosions last night were awesome. Wait till you get to the world to come and your own brain is exploding with the information of creation. And those are the things we're going to delve into, but we're going to explain the shape and all of this. What is the tree of life? We'll get into all of that next week. So, Brother Cedar, would you close?
Thank you for this knowledge. Teach you, Father, for the understanding of at least the attempt to try to understand how complex, beautiful, and amazing you are, Father. Help us to retain this information, maybe something that we meditate on all week, Father. May we come next week with anticipation, Father, to learn more, come closer to you, Father, and understanding the sacred of Father. For your blessing over the Shabbat, give us an amazing week, Father. Name Yeshua, we pray.
Amen. Shabbat shalom.